The greatest journey in human history did not begin with an army. It began with a few families standing at the edge of the world they knew, looking toward dry mountains, empty horizons, and lands no one in their group had ever seen. Today, we draw their journey as an arrow leaving Africa. Clean, simple, inevitable. But that arrow is wrong. The route out of Africa opened and closed with the climate. During wet periods, rivers crossed deserts. Lakes appeared inside Arabia. Grasslands spread where sand dominates today. Then the rain weakened, and those green corridors vanished again. Humans did not leave Africa once. They tried again, and again, and again. Some of the first journeys began astonishingly early. At Mislia Cave, in what is now Israel, part of a Homo sapiens jaw shows that our species had reached the Levant at least 177,000 years ago. That is more than 100,000 years before the migration usually credited with populating most of the world. And there may have been an even more surprising attempt. A fragmentary skull from Apodema Cave in Greece has been interpreted as Homo sapiens and dated to more than 210,000 years ago. Thousands of generations before modern humans permanently settled Europe, one group may already have reached its southern edge. But they did not stay. Later fossils from the same region belonged to Neanderthals. Whatever happened to those early Homo sapiens, their expansion appears to have ended. They may have died out, retreated, or been absorbed into other populations. The Levant tells a similar story. More than 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens lived at sites such as Sahul and Kafse. Then their clear presence faded. These first travelers were not necessarily the ancestors of the people who later spread across Eurasia. They were explorers from branches that may no longer exist. So what kept pulling humans out of Africa? Sometimes the answer was water. Arabia looks like an enormous barrier today, but it has not always been a desert. During stronger monsoon periods, rain reached deep into the peninsula. Lakes filled, grass returned, herds moved into the interior, and humans followed them. At Al-Wusta, in Saudi Arabia, researchers found a Homo sapiens finger bone beside the remains of animals that lived around ancient grasslands and water. The bone is roughly 90,000 years old. These people were not desperately clinging to one narrow coastline. They had moved deep into Arabia, following a landscape that no longer exists. And they were not the last to do it. Archaeological evidence suggests that human groups entered Arabia repeatedly whenever water returned. When the climate dried, some populations moved on, others withdrew. Some may have disappeared completely. The road out of Africa was not permanently open. It was a door controlled by climate. But around 70,000 years ago, something inside Africa also began to change. Homo sapiens started occupying a wider range of environments. Forests that demanded different knowledge. Dry regions where water had to be remembered and shared. Coasts with unfamiliar food. Landscapes with greater swings in temperature. This was not one sudden invention. It was a broader kind of flexibility. A population that could change its food, movements, and tools did not need the next landscape to resemble the last one. It could enter a new world and learn how to live there. Then, around 50,000 years ago, one expansion became different from those that came before. A relatively small population left Africa and became ancestral to most people living outside the continent today. They were not the first to leave. They were the first whose descendants spread so widely that their ancestry endured across generations. But which road did they take? One possibility leads northeast through Sinai and the Levant. Another crosses the southern Red Sea region toward Arabia. Both may have been used. Different groups may have followed different routes during different climatic windows. There was no road sign pointing toward Asia. People followed water, animals, coastlines, valleys, and other people. After the main dispersal, the Persian Plateau may have become one of the most important crossroads in human history. Groups could remain there for generations. Some moved west toward Europe. Others turned east into Central and South Asia. Populations separated, reconnected, and split again. A map shows arrows. Real migration looked more like a growing network. Families moved only as far as they needed. Children were born along the route. Camps became familiar. A temporary stop lasted a lifetime. The next generation moved beyond a mountain their grandparents had never crossed. And everywhere they went, the land was already inhabited. In Western Eurasia, Homo sapiens encountered Neanderthals. The meeting was not only violent competition. Genetic evidence shows that the ancestors of people living outside Africa today interbred with Neanderthals roughly 45 to 49,000 years ago. They met closely enough to have children. But even during this successful expansion, many branches still failed. Some of the earliest Homo sapiens populations known from Europe left little or no detectable ancestry in later people. They reached new territory, survived for generations, and then disappeared from the genetic record. Migration was never a guarantee. Farther east, Homo sapiens encountered Denisovan-related populations. These meetings left different genetic traces across Asia and Oceania, suggesting that contact happened more than once and in more than one region. The journey was becoming faster and far more complicated. At Tampa Ling in Laos, Homo sapiens fossils may date back between 86 and 68,000 years. In Sumatra, human teeth dating between roughly 73 and 63,000 years ago reveal something remarkable. Homo sapiens had entered tropical rainforest. That environment was dense, wet, and difficult to navigate. Familiar open-country hunting strategies were not enough. People had to recognize new plants, new animals, new dangers, and new seasonal patterns. They adapted again. Then the land ran out. Beyond the edge of continental Southeast Asia lay Wallachia, a region of islands that had never been fully connected by dry land. To continue east, people had to cross water. They watched currents. They understood coastlines. They organized groups, carried supplies, and entered islands they could not simply reach on foot. Eventually, humans reached Sahul, the ancient landmass joining Australia and New Guinea. Depending on which evidence proves most reliable, this may have happened around 65,000 years ago, or during later waves closer to 50,000 years ago. Either way, the achievement was extraordinary. Within a fraction of human evolutionary time, descendants of African populations had crossed deserts, mountains, rainforests, and open sea. But we should not imagine one unstoppable wave sweeping across the world. There were many waves. Some moved early and disappeared. Some mixed with populations already living in Eurasia. Some remained isolated. Some became ancestors of millions of people. Others left only a jaw, a tooth, a tool, or a fragment of DNA. The successful expansion also came with a cost. Only part of Africa's genetic diversity traveled with the founding populations. The groups outside Africa were comparatively small, creating a population bottleneck whose effects can still be detected today. The farther people traveled, the more often small groups separated from larger ones. Each separation carried only part of the diversity that existed before. And the arrows we draw today hide almost everything that mattered. They hide droughts, failed hunts, frozen passes, children born beside unknown rivers, communities turning back, groups meeting strangers, journeys that ended only a few kilometers beyond the previous generation. Humans did not follow lines on a map. They followed possibility. From Western Asia, different populations spread toward Europe, Siberia, South Asia, and East Asia. Others continued into Southeast Asia and across the sea toward Sahul. Each route created a different history, and Homo sapiens did not enter those worlds unchanged. They carried Neanderthal ancestry. Some carried Denisovan-related ancestry. They absorbed genes from people whose cultures, languages, and faces are mostly lost to us. The journey out of Africa was not a clean replacement. It was a story of movement and mixture. Today, every person outside Africa carries evidence of that long expansion. But no living population represents the entire journey, and no single route explains everyone. Humanity did not leave Africa once. It left in waves. Some journeys failed. Some disappeared. One expanded farther than all the others, and its descendants kept moving until the edges of the known world were gone.